Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Incubator Podcast live at Hot Topics in Neonatology. We're joined by three fellows, Tanima, Hailey, and Juhi. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just wrapping up the poster session, and you guys were presenting your work. It's all very interesting. I'm going to try to go one by one, but who wants to maybe tell us a little bit what you guys presented?
Sure, I can start.
All right, Juhi. So tell us where you're from, and you said you're a third-year fellow.
Yes. I'm at UIC, University of Illinois in Chicago. I'm currently a third year. I'm graduating soon, and my research is on lung ultrasound and using it as to quantify lung fluid index and to create a predictive tool ultimately to be able to predict respiratory support duration. My research was not limited by gestational age, but I generally was able to mainly get gestational ages from 30 weeks onwards. And so most of my patients are early term or late preterm infants. And I was able to use a lung index scoring system with blind reviewers who are actually adult POCUS adult critical care POCUS gurus who scored my images, and then I averaged those together to create a hopefully predictive tool. I wanted to see if the more because of the dynamic nature of the respiratory disease, I thought that maybe the dynamic tool of lung ultrasound would be able to help us understand when to remove respiratory support. And ultimately, I didn't see that, but I did see that the first exam within 6 hours of life did show the most correlation with respiratory support duration. So it got me to thinking that maybe this actually could replace our admission chest x-rays. And so that's sort of the direction I'm headed now in terms of analysis.
Very interesting. Very interesting, because I think that you are the new breed of neonatologists. It's almost we should have like on LinkedIn, first of all, like for the third year fellows, like open to work, right? So if anybody listening is looking for attendings and is willing to support good work, then you can definitely reach out to our fellows. But for you as a fellow, I mean, I didn't really have POCUS when I trained, and that's something that I learned as an attending. And I'm just wondering, how do you see this tool, and how does it enhance your practice? Do you see this as you said again, you mentioned the possibility of this replacing chest X-ray, but how does that fit into your workflow? I'm just curious to hear about that.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that we were looking at in terms of feasibility. I wasn't able to do that here because I had to consent the patient or the parents as well. So feasibility wasn't something I could measure, but I can say that I learned this tool for the study and it was very easy to pick up. So I think it is quite feasible. And because the early exam within the first 6 hours was the most predictive, it actually could be done on admission when you go see when you bring that baby in, you do the ultrasound right then and there, and you could actually use that to be able to help counsel families as well.
Because we tend to give parents kind of a very nebulous answer when they're asking like, oh, what are we looking at here? And you can say, well, some babies like in 6 hours they're fine, and then we send them back to you, and some others it's like 6 days and they're still stuck. Having a little bit more of predictive data is something that could be very helpful. Do you guys use POCUS as well in your practice?
Not as much. Yeah, we're starting to use more POCUS for LPs and for UVCs, but not so much for lung ultrasound. But I definitely think that's where it's headed.
It's not very easy to. It's a skill that you definitely have to learn. It's not something where you can put the probe on and sort of understand what you're seeing. So it just definitely requires a little bit of skill. Tell us a little bit about the poster that you presented today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm interested in AI and its applications in neonatology and also in neonatal IVH. So as you know, grade 4 IVH, we are pretty good as neonatologists and as providers at predicting what the baby's outcome will be in terms of high rates of mortality or poor neurodevelopmental impairment. But we're not very good at predicting what a grade 2 or a grade 3 baby is going to look like, say, in the next 5 days to 7 days to 30 days while they're still in the ICU. So I'm hoping to leverage AI, more specifically large language models and generative AI models to solve this puzzle. So my project today was using large language models to extract prognostic variables from existing AI literature so we can map these prognostic variables and eventually feed them into a foundation model and be able to use clinical elements, these prognostic variables, and imaging data to predict short-term outcomes for IVH.
Very. So you're using actually data that was peer-reviewed, published,
Yeah.
and data that we're using to counsel families and see what maybe the trends and the connections that we are missing that potentially AI could pick up.
Absolutely.
Very cool. And what are some of the findings that you're presenting?
Yeah, so I looked into 4 different outcomes: mortality, progression of IVH to a higher grade, complications such as PHH, and also resolution. But interestingly, there are no studies out there on resolution of IVH, or more specifically, AI to predict resolution from IVH. So I think that represents a critical gap in literature and something that we should definitely work towards.
Yeah, we tend to just like measure a baby by their highest grade of IVH, and they're sort of stuck with this label as like even if the IVH completely resolves on ultrasound and MRI, we're still like former grade 2 IVH, grade 3 IVH.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. And the other prognostic variables that we found for my other outcomes are not novel elements: low gestational age, low birth weight, low 1-minute APGAR score. Some interesting ones were mean arterial pressure, specifically for the development of complications from IVH. And then the birth location was an interesting one that I found, that if you're a born outpatient, then that also makes you at a higher risk of having progression of IVH.
Very interesting. This is another area where both of your interests could combine, where doing a POCUS ultrasound of middle cerebral artery can tell you so much about brain perfusion. It's like so easy to get. And you could leverage that and see what the LLM has to say about that.
Absolutely.
Are you guys using AI in your practice? No, don't lie. If you it's a perfectly okay. It's a safe space. No.
No, it's a constant discussion, seminar topic, all of that, but no, not yet.
Okay. What about you, Hailey?
Yeah, so I do qualitative research looking at
I want to know if you use AI first before you tell me about.
Oh no, I don't use the AI at all. ChatGPT. Yeah, I rarely even like remember that ChatGPT exists, but I learn. I think that several fellows in our program do research using AI, and I learn a lot from them. And I'm constantly reminded that I should take advantage of my resources.
So tell us about the qualitative research that you're working on.
Yeah. So I do qualitative research looking at the physician experience of morbidity and mortality in the NICU. And so looking at both fellows and attending physicians, what are the cases that impact them the most? What exactly is that impact? What's the professional impact? What's the personal impact? And then how can we support physicians through their very emotional work? What coping processes do they use? What's kind of most helpful for them as they're working through
Yeah,
these
something
things?
that's often overlooked and that affects everybody very differently, I believe, depending on a lot of various factors. So I'm curious to hear a little bit about what are some of the items that you've elucidated. Teasing out data from qualitative research is an art. So I'm curious to sort of the domains and themes that you've identified.
Yeah, we're still working on a lot of our analysis, but some of the things that we've kind of noticed emerging so far is that there are kind of 3 types of losses that are most impactful, or the most impactful losses kind of fall into 3 categories. The first being when there's a mismatch between the outcome and the expectations. So that can be for the physician, right? You have a death that's unexpected that you never really thought was going to happen when you walked into your shift, that you don't get any closure on. It can be for the family as well, where they kind of really lose the baby that they were dreaming about. And again, these don't all have to be deaths for this study. A lot of the cases that people talked about were, we call them non-death losses, or kind of serious morbidities. The second category is when there was a really meaningful interaction or relationship with the patient's family or the patient themselves. And maybe that was just a long-standing relationship. Maybe the family taught you something. Maybe the baby was really close in age to your baby, or you otherwise kind of felt like they looked like your baby. And then the last category we're calling weight of responsibilities. That's really when there's something about the case that maybe you felt like could have gone differently or better, and maybe the patient could have been saved, or maybe it was the first time that you've had a death in training and you didn't know what your role was, or it's the first time you had a death as an attending and it was the first time that you were the one ultimately responsible for calling the
Yeah,
code.
there's a big difference between dealing with this as an attending and as a fellow, and it is something that you have to train yourself for. So I
Yeah.
think that um, I mean, my only advice for fellows in general is really the fact that if you do take the responsibility and you do feel like these are your patients in fellowship, it's a much easier transition once you become an attending, because you've taken that weight before. But yeah, very interesting. I'm going to try to segue into a lighter topic and ask you a little bit about the conference. Is this you guys' first time at Hot Topics?
Yeah,
First time.
First time. How are you liking it so far?
it's been wonderful. I've been here since Sunday. Been great.
Was there any specific sessions that really caught your attention that you really enjoyed? I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I think all of the sessions, very honestly. I really enjoyed Dr. Jensen's talk today. I thought that was fantastic as usual.
He's a good draw for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And I do think it's really important to phenotype BPD, and it's definitely something that we should all kind of look into. And then also extracting endotypes from it would also be
Yeah,
very.
I think phenotyping is kind of what you were referring to about as well. I think every patient has a phenotype and has a certain, we can predict a little bit of trajectory based on that. So this is definitely interesting. What about you, Hailey?
I always like hearing about the PDA. So
Oh, that was a big talk today.
my session today, I call myself a clinical minimalist. So I don't like to. I kind of like let babies be and kind of watch and wait. And I am very attracted to that approach. So it was nice to hear some research that continues to support that from PDA.
Absolutely. How about you?
Yeah, I think it was really interesting to see a lot of the studies that aren't published yet. Specifically, the nano trial was
Yeah.
really shocking, and it was interesting to see him being shocked as well about the actual results. But it was nice to also see that you actually can circle back and reestablish things that have been established 40 years ago
Can
and
challenge the
and
dogma.
challenge exactly. So I think it was really eye opening.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for dropping by the podcast. Congratulations on these amazing posters and good luck with finding jobs and moving towards an attending role.